All right, I'd like to welcome you all. We're going to call meeting number 30 to order at 5:29, March 16th, 2015. Would you all please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Kathleen.
McCampbell.
Here.
Scott. Anderson. Here. Davidson.
Here.
Fleming.
Here.
Okay. First on the agenda tonight is the consent agenda. All matters listed under item 1 consent agenda having been discussed are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. On the consent agenda tonight, we have the usual finances and miscellaneous, minutes of previous meetings, payroll and city claims, beer, liquor, wine, and cigarettes, reports, and bonds. We have 3 resolutions. The first resolution approving renewal of taxi cab vehicle for hire license for Executive Transportation, LLC, doing business as Executive Transportation, LLC. The second is a resolution approving renewal of a taxi cab vehicle for hire license for Dennis C. Maines, doing business as Yellow Cab. The third is a resolution approving renewal of taxi cab vehicle for hire license for Robin Canova, doing business as A to Z Taxi, LLC. We have a set date for public hearing for April 6, 2015, and that is for consideration of plans and specifications for the 2015 sanitary sewer rehab project. And we also have 2 appointments. Mayor Pro Tem.
City Planning Commission, Larry Werner. Civil Service Commission, Simon Counterman.
So, thank you to Larry and Simeon on that. Is there anyone from the audience that would like to have any of these items removed? I see none. Council?
None here.
Your Honor, I move to approve all items listed under item 1 consent.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Kathleen?
McCampbell.
Aye.
Anderson. Aye. Davidson.
Aye.
Fleming.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. Okay, this is the time set for a hearing for consideration of a loan agreement in a principal amount not to exceed $1,700,000 general obligation corporate purpose. Publication's been made in the Hawkeye as prescribed by law. Those for or against can be heard at this time. Point guard.
The $1.7 million GO bond was to, you have a sheet of paper there that kind of outlines how that was broken out. Estimated uses of funds. The majority of the 1.7 million is for street purposes, and you see a breakdown there. Some of it will go towards, potentially go towards Division Street, 886 towards our primary street project fund. Then we have a minor miscellaneous fund with 114,000. There's some financing costs and bond counsel costs, about $60,000 on the overall issue. And then purchase of a fire truck, estimated about $546,000. The way the $1.7 million bond is structured, it allows, for example, if the fire truck were to come in purchase price at about, if it was to come in at $520,000 as an example, the overage of funds borrowed, we just move over into the street project amount. So we have some flexibility to move those funds around depending on how that's set up.
This minor street resurfacing program, those were particular streets. Is there anything there? I guess I was out at Crapo this weekend, and it's really bad out there. Do any of these funds take care of anything like that?
They can, and that was one that I asked Eric to have as an agenda item that we talked about within our
Okay.
department head meeting tomorrow, that we need to have some discussion about that, because
It
you're not
just-
the only one who brought up
Yeah.
the condition of some of the roads out there.
Okay, well, I'm glad that's gonna be addressed.
Well, I don't know how, we're gonna at least start talking about what we need to do.
Well, that's what I
so.
mean, I'm glad at least you're gonna start talking about it.
Yeah, and I mentioned the 1.7 million. Off to the right on your sheets there, it shows the overall projects. Several of those projects, Division Street as an example, well, Division Street is the one project out of here that is not completely funded out of this borrowing. You'll see the sources and uses of funds on that. The primary source of funding actually on the Division Street project is a state grant that we're receiving through DOT federal funds. And then some cash on hand. The primary annual resurfacing program, we've been budgeting right about $886,000. We had that in this current year's budget. We have it in FY16, which we're doing the borrowing on. That's about the same amount we're doing on an annual basis moving forward. We do have some cash left over from last year's project, which is where you see the cash on hand being used as a portion of the project.
Looks like a good program. You knew I'd say that, didn't you?
I was hoping.
Council?
Looks good to me.
Is there anyone from the audience that has any comments to item number 1? Well, everybody looks so excited today. Okay. And
Your
I see-
Honor, I move to close the public hearing on item 1, consideration of loan agreement for $1.7 million.
Second. Thank you. Kathleen?
McCampbell,
Aye.
Scott, Anderson,
Aye.
Davidson,
Aye.
Fleming.
Aye.
Okay. This is the time set for hearing for consideration of a loan agreement and principal amount not to exceed $700,000 general obligation police department building. Publication's been made, $700,000, I'm sorry. Publication's been made in the Hawkeye as prescribed by law. Those for or against may be heard at this time.
Again, this is a borrowing that was within the FY16 budget. The rehab repairs on the police department facility had a couple of different ranges for even on the interim improvements that were recommended to be done. As a reminder, the overall project to estimate for doing everything to really do a full-scale rehab of the structure would be more in the $6.5 million range. To do more of a rehab that would allow this structure to be used on over the next 5 to 10 years, there are 2 different funding ranges that were provided, $500,000 to $700,000 cost estimate on the low end, and $800,000 to $1 million on the higher end. One of the primary components on for the difference between those 2 pieces, I think, was HVAC. There might have been a few other improvements that were recommended that fall outside of the scope of the $700,000 funding. With this $700,000 borrowing, it would provide about $600,000 for rehab costs, and then some engineering design work estimate about that $96,000 to get it done. Depending on where costs come back, moving as we go into it, put bids out, if there is a cost overrun, there is potential to pick up and do a little bit more, but it would be out of the general fund to cover any cost overruns if we were to desire to do that. You're stewing on it.
It's that $700,000. I mean, what I'm getting from citizens is that's money that we're spending on a rehab job on a building that we don't plan on keeping as the police department. And you know, I have to say, well, I'll tell you, I'm really, I'm struggling with spending that kind of money. To me, again, I feel the same way, I really do. If we're gonna spend that kind of money in rehab, we might as well just go all the way and try to find something permanent.
And I think all of us would agree with that, but I think our policies for paying off debt and not taking on additional debt at this time, that just doesn't fit in with it. It would cost so much more money. I mean, I think we would all prefer something better than what they have. I mean, this is a big amount, but what's the amount if we go all the way?
If we were to do, I mean, we never got to where we did a full-scale analysis on the facility that we had looked at when we were looking at the US Bank building. We had some potential design costs that would have put that between purchase and rehab, I think in the six and a half million. But as we were doing that, that was designed to be the type of rehab that would incorporate the sheriff's department as well. We never did have a final number for if we were doing it just for our own needs. It'd be a little less than that. I'm not sure where it would come in at. But yes, you're talking more in that $6 million range. Not only the borrowing capacity is an issue and concern on doing something like that. The other part is to do that as a GO bond is a voter approved asking with a 60% approval necessary. And I think that was part of the concern moving forward on that. And right now we've got a structure that you have some life safety issues that if you're not getting something done to have another viable structure to go into, these have to be addressed.
I know, but even on the, you're seeing the $6.5 million was the total on that to get the building done, but I still don't feel like that's enough. That's a target that is something that is even the biggest concern, because if we can, my only point is this: if we can make $700,000 enough to patch the old building together, we couldn't make a lower number enough to get that building to get a different building or something else in a position to where it's there, it's a lock, and we can gradually do it. But I mean, at least with the money that we're sinking into something that's going to be long term. I mean, I understand, I know what you're saying, because we don't really have a lot of options. I just, I don't feel real comfortable with it, and I know that I have constituents that have problems with it. That, you know, they're like, is this the only option? I mean, you know, go ahead and get your feet wet, you know, or get your whole body wet instead of just testing out the water. And, you know, I lean toward that. I think maybe they would be, you know, looking at this $700,000 for rehab, again, on money that we're never going to get this money back. You know, it's not like we're going to invest it in this building and we're going to make the money back off the building when we get rid of it. This is money that we're never going to get back in value. So
We'll get some of it back.
maybe the citizens are more ready for it than what we think.
And I hate to even say this, but I feel like things like this have come up in the past, and we've gone ahead and borrowed money and tried to do things, and we're not in the point where we can do that yet. And we were paying $800,000 a year of interest for a bond for nothing on some decisions in the past. So, I mean, I think we need to hold true, and I would like to see a new police station, but we need to get our debt and everything more under control before we can do that. I mean, I would love to see that, but if we give into it, it's like there's always something else that we're going to give into, and if we've made this decision to pay down our debts and do this, then we need to stick with that right now, because we could have, are we going to, backload this debt and pay $700,000 in interest for nothing? I mean, you know, I just don't want to see something like that happen again.
We owe it to the police department, I think, to move ahead and get this done. It's not a popular thing to do, but it's a necessity. And that doesn't mean that we can't start planning, at least for the future, to build a new building someplace. I mean, that's what I'm hoping happens eventually. And I don't think our doing this negates that thought. I mean, but again, we don't have the money to do anything else now to speak of.
Part of property ownership is maintaining that property. and making necessary upgrades to the property. I mean, when you own a home every 20 years or so, you need to redo your bathroom or redo the kitchen or put a new roof on or that type of thing. And that's what I'm looking at this as but to extend the life of the building, extend the use of the building. We made a decision back in the early 90s, and when I say we, the city, the council at the time made the decision to modify that building and turn it into a police department because they were in desperate need of space at the time and had been for a good number of years. And the plan was in 20 years to get out of that building and to provide a better facility. And we've gone well beyond that 20 years, and we've done little structurally to that building to maintain it. Probably the best thing that's happened for that building is that we lost our tenant, and I hate to say that, but the weight and the use of that building was beyond the load that it could handle, and I think we need to do it right when we do a new facility. Personally, I think it needs to be a joint law enforcement facility. I think we need to wait for the time to be right when we're in a better financial position and we have all parties at the table and we've thought it out clearly and for a long time and made the right decision for the community, and that spending the money now to do the necessary upgrades to the building is the right thing to do.
I agree with that.
I do too.
Mayor, I've had the same constituency, not the same constituency, but I've had some of the same constituency say the same thing. They think it's a bad decision, but I don't want to see us without a police headquarters, next year or the following year, because the crack that's in the wall got so much bigger that we had to abandon the building. And if we have to make a decision under pressure, we've done that before. We've had to make a decision under pressure, and it hasn't been the right decision.
Amen.
I mean, I think this is buying us the necessary time. We've got a chance to get our financial house back in order. It gives us a chance to make the right decision on a facility down the road.
Councilman Davidson?
I want to hear if anybody from the public has anything to say first, before I say anything, if that's okay.
Okay. Is there anybody from the audience that would care to comment on this subject? Is there anybody? Mr. Williams?
I've had the opportunity to tour the building up and down, and to me, there's a lot of engineering structural deficiencies just in the age of the building and the way it was built. So I want you to keep that in mind, that $700,000 may not go very far once we get into doing something.
It's true.
And if nothing else, maybe we could start a grassroots thing of community getting together, like when they built the library. Start to get a fund started and put enough money into it that we could finish the bonding on it. Thank you.
Thank you,
I'm Larry
sir.
Williams, by the way.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Anyone else from the audience? I see none. Councilman?
I only would agree that we need to do the upgrades for the personal safety of the people that work in that building. And I agree with you, Mr. Williams, $700,000 is probably not going to get it done, but at least there'll be something. And I only will agree to a vote for this if we aggressively pursue a plan so that 5 years from now we have something on hand, in hand, to show what we're going to do. I don't want to go another 5 years and say, well, we don't have anything, so we've got to do another $1 million upgrade on the same old building. So that's my challenge.
Except that
That's a good one.
You guys good?
Yes.
Yep.
Kathleen?
I move to close the public
No,
hearing.
thank you.
Second. No.
I thought you said second.
Well, she looked at me though.
Yeah, I didn't hear. McCampbell?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Anderson?
Aye.
Davidson?
Aye.
Fleming.
Aye.
Your Honor, I move that we approve a resolution expressing intent to enter into a loan agreement providing for the levy of the taxes thereof for the 2.4 million.
Second.
Kathleen?
McCampbell.
No.
Scott.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Davidson.
Aye.
Fleming.
Aye.
Okay. Ayes got her there. This is time set for a hearing for consideration of plans and specifications for the 2015 Angular Arch Sewer Repair Project. Publication has been made in the Hawkeye as prescribed by law. Those for or against can be heard at this time. Rhino.
Mayor, council. As discussed at the work session,
presentation for the slideshow here.
there we go. The Angular Arch Sewer beneath Burlington Northern's main line has some deficiencies that have caused some of the railroad ballast to come through the arch sewer where some stones have been missing. This has been kind of patchworked back in the past. The city believes it was done by Burlington Northern, the patchwork project. This is under the main line at the end of Angular Street behind Ideal Ready Mix. You got the main line coming through town. The arch sewer runs under Angular out to the river. It's right underneath the main line is where those couple of deficiencies are located. What we're looking to do is using shotcrete and reinforcing steel to just reinforce that area where there's a structural deficiency. Overall, the structure's in good shape for being 100 and I believe 25 years old, right in that age range. Cost estimate is around $75,000. We don't have, this is a ballpark cost. We haven't done any projects similar to this, so I'm kind of basing this off some work that was done within the Hawkeye Sewer projects back in the early 2000s. The project would be funded through the miscellaneous sewer fund, and I believe the current status of that fund's around $143,000.
Okay.
As commented at the work session, we hadn't heard anything from Burlington Northern regarding permitting and working together on things like that. They have been in contact again. There's no permits that will be required since we're working within our structure. They do require that when our contractor's working down there that a flagman be present, but they're willing to furnish that flagman. Regularly, that cost for a flagman between $1,200 and $1,500 a day. So there was some concern about whether Burlington Northern would help out with any cost. That is a help out on cost to some degree.
How many days?
Working days, probably around 10. So you're looking at $15,000 potentially there in savings by having Burlington Northern furnish that flagman.
How do you get a job like that? But, so you did, the contact has been made and everything?
Yep, and there has been a little bit of discussion as far as them potentially picking up a little bit of cost of materials, but there's nothing set in stone. And at this point, there's not money allocated by them for that. So there's going to be some discussion above the gentleman that I was speaking with as to whether they are willing to toss some help our direction in the cost.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for being persistent.
We had some work done on a project in last community I was in. We had to buy materials through the railroad. It was a 250% markup on all materials and time and labor. So getting them to waive those fees is a significant piece. That was a different rail line, but it's pretty typical for the industry. It's tough to get it's a difficult process to get cooperation on something.
Is there anybody from the audience that has any comments or concerns? I see none. Council?
Something we have to do.
My comments were just that I hope that Burlington Northern participates, so if you're pursuing that, I'm glad.
A couple of years ago, we got a $10,000 grant from them, that went to parks, was it?
Correct. And did you specifically line item that towards something, Eric?
Yeah, it's the outdoor classroom within
Oh, yeah.
Crapo
Okay.
Park, and I think we plan to have a ribbon cutting and have them involved this spring sometime.
You know, hopefully next time they derail one of their trains and wipe out our fence, we can make them buy the materials through us at 250% markup.
That's a good idea.
I still can't believe we're having to pay for the repair of something that they broke. And I hope we've gone further into that study on the other sewers under the main line when they raise those tracks and made sure we're documenting any damage to those.
At present, the actual location of the damage in the rail yard, the storm sewer for the depot, the actual location's undetermined at this point. There's just a number of deficiencies, the appearance is. So we have been in conversation with the railroad about potentially running a new storm sewer from the depot down to the angular arch sewer. That's still, like I said, in talks. Early thoughts were that they would be willing to partake in part of the cost of that as well. So,
Let them know we're very much in favor of that,
And that we appreciate it.
that we expected. They're nicer than I am.
Any other comments or concerns?
A motion to close.
Second.
Okay. Kathleen?
McCampbell,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Davidson.
Aye.
Fleming.
Aye.
A resolution approving plans and specifications for the 2015 Angular Arch Sewer Repair Project.
Second.
Salzberg?
McCampbell,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Davidson.
Aye.
Fleming.
Aye.
Okay. This is time set for hearing for consideration of plans and specifications for the 2015 HMA resurfacing project. Publication has been made in the Hawkeye as prescribed by law. Those for or against can be heard at this time. Rhino?
the 2015 HMA resurfacing project here in town entails resurfacing Garfield from Barrett to Spray, Mason from Mason to Garfield, Spray from Liebrook to Garfield, Angular from Garfield to Summer, Valley from Central to 7th, Gulf Lane, Pilger Pearl from Sunnyside to Gannon, Birch on both sides of Pilger. These locations are, for the most part, what was in the 5-year street plan for this year. There were some variations made. Reasons for the variation were due to the condition of the pavement, to minimize unnecessary costs associated with mobilization and other projects in the area that would be disrupting streets. Locations that were removed from this year's 5-year street plan was Franklin from Central to 7th. The condition of Franklin and those blocks requires more investigation as to whether resurfacing is the appropriate method for addressing the street. Reconstruction may be more appropriate. Additional costs for mobilization were also a concern. Gertrude from Agency to the south that end. It's a concrete street that's not in the best of shape, but we have worse streets in town. And it was an additional mobilization concern. And then Parkway from 14th to Madison was removed, mostly to address the resurfacing of Valley from Central to 7th. What was added was Valley from Central to 7th. Coming up, we've got the hearing on the MASL sewer separation. As a part of that, we're going to be running a storm sewer underneath of Valley Street from Central to the halfway house. As a part of that, there's a certain amount of street patching that goes back. And given the condition of Valley in that area, we felt it was better to go ahead and resurface the entire street instead of just having one small section of that street that's in fairly decent shape. Mason from Mason to Garfield was on the 5-year street plan previously in fiscal year 17 and fiscal year 20. We're working on Garfield so there's no additional cost for mobilization, so there's some savings there by addressing it now. Pilger and Pearl from Sunnyside to Gannon and Birch on both sides of Pilger were in the 5-year street plan for fiscal year 12 and fiscal year 19. So we kind of have it back in the middle at fiscal year 16. There's no cost for mobilization by adding these streets. Project funding, we've got some money left over from fiscal year 15, just shy of $41,000, or $41,000, yes. And then the fiscal year 16 budget gives us an available funding around $803,000. Our cost estimates around $785,000. As project progresses, there may be some project underruns or overruns that would require change orders. If we're underrunning on the project, we'll see if we can't get a few more blocks done like we did last year. Last year we were able to add 4 blocks to the project and we were still under by $40,000.
Questions? I love that.
Brian,
Yes, sir.
I know this is a different topic, but we have a seal coating plan for this summer also?
No, there is no money in the 5-year street plan or in the budget for seal coating. We did have at the resolution of the last project of seal coating, I believe we had another 1.5 years of work that would need to be done to complete all of the seal coat streets within the town.
Thank you.
Is there anybody from the audience that has any questions, comments, or concerns? I see none. Council?
No,
Nothing that hasn't been
good
addressed.
program, let's do it.
Okay.
I'm anxious to see Garfield get done. That's-
Amen to that.
People yelling at me for 10 years on that one.
Well, I'll tell you, that's gonna be good to see done.
The motion to close.
Second.
All right, move to second. Kathleen?
McCampbell.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Davidson.
Aye.
Fleming.
Aye.
A resolution approving plans and specifications for the 2015 HMA resurfacing project.
Second.
Move to second. Kathleen?
McCampbell.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Davidson.
Aye.
Fleming.
Aye.
Okay, moving right along. This is the time set for hearing for consideration of plans and specifications for the 2015 Mazel Sewer Separation Market Phase 1. Publication's been made in the Hawkeye as prescribed by law. Those for or against can be heard at this time. Rhino?
Mayor, Council. The MASL sewer separation, Market Basin Phase 1. Primary reasons for the project are the city is under an IDNR consent order for separation of our combined sewers. And then primarily this area was chosen because we are resurfacing Division Street with an SDP project this summer. We wanted to get the sewer separated along Division Street so that we did not have to excavate in the newly resurfaced street in the future. We added a little bit of extra work in the project area to bring project unit prices down. It's still area that needs to be separated, just expanded out the area from the Division Street area. The project location would be Division Street along Division from Gunnison to Marshall, from 9th to 8th and 7th to 6th. It'd be 9th Street from Elm to Division, and then the intersections there at 8th, 7th, and 6th. Market Street from Woodlawn to Central, and then Valley from Central down towards the halfway house. Fiscal year 15 budget for the MSL sewer separation is $772,000 for the project. The cost estimate is right at $600,000.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the audience that has any comments or concerns? I see none. Council?
Nope.
Motion to close?
Second.
Moved and second. Kathleen?
McCampbell.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Davidson.
Aye.
Fleming.
Aye. You're going to have a resolution approving plans and specs for the 2015 Mansell Sewer Separation Market Phase 1.
Second.
So moved in second. Kathleen?
McCampbell.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Davidson.
Aye.
Fleming.
Aye.
Your Honor, a resolution approving the final plat of the Rathbone subdivision.
Second.
Second.
Thank you.
This is a two-lot subdivision located north of Mount Pleasant Street between Dane and Weimer Streets, with Lot 1 being an existing house, being approximately .39 acres in size, and Lot 2 being 2.39 acres in size. The area behind the house is a open field at this point. I'll show a map here to give you orientation as well. So it's this area between Dane and Weimer Street, north of Mount Pleasant Street, with the YMCA here at the south corner. Just a large lot between the two streets, so this would allow future development on this larger portion of the lot or sale of that lot, with a house remaining on a separate lot.
All right. Anybody from the audience have any questions or concerns? I see none again. Council?
None here.
Nope.
Okay, looks like we're satisfied.
McCampbell.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Davidson.
Aye.
Fleming.
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Your Honor, I have a resolution of the support of a redevelopment and renovation of the historic Tama complex at 300-310 Jefferson Street.
Second?
Second.
This is a resolution of support only. There's no local match required for this. The Tama building at 310 Jefferson Street recently received grant funding for some upper story apartments. They're looking at 48 residential units, 1 and 2 bedrooms in size, within these buildings here on Jefferson Street, with 3rd Street here on the east side of it. Through that grant, 25 of the units would be 80% of the average county wage income qualified, and 23 of the units would be market rate units. They are looking at workforce housing tax credits as well. It's a program that replaced the enterprise zone within the state, and one of the requirements of the workforce housing tax credits is that they receive a resolution of support through the city council. Again, it doesn't obligate any funds from the city. It just acknowledges that the city supports the project. A couple of the requirements for these projects with this new program can be either upper story housing, repair, rehab of dilapidated housing, housing located in a gray field, or new construction in a greenfield if the community meets demonstrated workforce housing needs. So as you see, this would be meeting the qualification of upper story housing development for those tax credits. Any questions about the project or the resolution?
These are apartments, correct?
These are apartments, yep.
What were the other ones that somebody previously was going to try to develop their worker transits or something?
Yeah, there'd been a couple different discussions, boarding house or
Boarding house,
Yep.
that's the word I was looking
How many of these are market rate?
51% have to be that median income and 49 market rate, so 23 out of the 48 will be market rate.
Okay.
All units have to be constructed the same. They can't make the market rate nicer than the income qualified units. They all have to be, meet the same requirements, and so all units will have to be constructed the same. You can't have all the market rate on having good views and the income qualified different, so it'll just be dispersed throughout the,
Where are they going
building.
to park?
that'll
That's a
be
good
something
question.
that'll be coming forward. The developer would like to come before council and give a presentation on their plans at some point in the future. Obviously, with this, it's a large scale project and looking at first floor commercial renovation down the road as well, but that's something he's talked about as parking as well.
And this developer, I mean, this is a different owner, and this developer is out of Keokuk and has been successful down there. I think we're
Yep,
real
the-
fortunate to have him come up here and do this
Yeah,
development.
Kevin Kuckelman is the one who's developing the project.
What's the name?
Kevin Kuckelman.
You say he's done some of this in Keokuk?
Well, he's done development in Keokuk, yeah. I think he did the old hotel building there, didn't he?
Yeah, yep.
And
He's
then
done a
another
few
building.
larger scale redevelopment
He's
projects.
an attorney.
We won't hold that against him.
No.
Is there anybody from the audience that has any questions or concerns, comments? I see none. Council?
Good project. I think we really need market rate rentals downtown, so I'm really happy to see that part of these will be market rate.
I think we need parking downtown,
I do
but I'll talk about that later. Council, you guys good? Okay, Kathleen?
McCampbell,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Davidson, Fleming.
Aye.
Okay. This is the time where we will entertain comments from the audience. I'm going to ask that you try not to talk all day so I don't have to time you, but I do want to give everybody the freedom to speak your piece. So if there's anybody from the audience that has any comments, now would be your opportunity. Everybody at once.
My name is Steve Rowland. I live here in Burlington. The city council is well aware of the situation with the dog in our neighborhood, and even though the person involved has been cited by the police department and there is a case pending with the county attorney, the situation is as bad as it's ever been. And we're getting to the point where, you know, I'm worried about the bad press for Burlington. Because when this thing initially started, we got calls from, because we moved around the United States a lot, we got a lot of calls from people, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New Jersey, saying, are you the couple that's being harassed on this? So it's bad press. It needs to be taken care of. Plus, we feel we're getting the runaround with the county attorney's office, which is just kind of log that in your memory, because this is a sad situation when we get treated that way. And we're at the point where it's quality of life. So we rebuilt our house in 2004, and I put $12,000 into the front porch last summer. And there's no doubt in my mind it's going to be aggravating for me to sit on the front porch and read the newspaper. So with that information, previously when we talked, Shane had indicated changing the ordinance related to barking dogs is going to be a process, and it's going to take a while. So where do we stand on that process?
Where can we get some insight on where we stand on that process? Because thank you, sir.
What I've talked to Steve about at length, these ordinances are super sensitive to neighborhoods. And you can make them as restrictive as you want or as lenient as you want. And this ordinance used to be more restrictive, and the council changed it to a more lenient ordinance, because what you have is neighborhood squabbles that then turn into people getting cited for maybe something that didn't need to be a citation. And so with that said, I understand Steve's problem, but at the same time, the problem I have in his neighborhood is nobody else has ever filed a complaint. Not that you necessarily have to have that, but it makes it extremely difficult. And the county attorney's office has offered some mediation in this case. I've shared that with you, and I don't think that's going to resolve it, or it doesn't seem like it. I think in talking to Steve, I don't think there's going to be any mediation. I mean, it's an extremely difficult thing. But does that justify having to change the whole ordinance for the city? I mean, and I've repeatedly, I know we've been there numerous times, but I repeatedly ask them to call us. That's our job. And we'll go there as many times as it takes, repeatedly, until we can try, if there is a room to issue a citation or not. The other half of this, what I want to say, dispute, will come in here and tell you, as you know, you've read all the emails, the exact opposite. So, you know, it's awful difficult for us to resolve when we're not called there. I know we've been called there numerous times. And when we had the opportunity to issue a citation, we did. And where that's going to end up with the county attorney is completely out of the police chief's control. I don't have anything to do with the criminal justice system other than put the case in front of the court. So I mean, I know I'm not offering him any resolve, but I've tried repeatedly to resolve this issue, and I guess I don't know what the resolve is gonna be.
Well, I guess my question is, if we said we were going to look at the ordinance, then do we look at the ordinance, the council? And it's not been brought to us to look at? I mean.
You can, but I guess what I'm trying to say to you is if you make that ordinance more restrictive, that's what they tried to change I don't know when you might remember, Tim, when Chief Warrenberg changed that. And it was because it was too restrictive. And then when they changed the ordinance, it took 2 or more complainants from the same neighborhood willing to assign a citation to get somebody into court. And the reason they did that is so you wouldn't have these neighborhood squabbles where it was just one person trying to get the other one in trouble. And so that's how we had left it. That's how it got left. It's a difficult situation for both parties, no question.
Well, let's re-examine the ordinance then.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick comment. I believe we sent you a copy or a link to the ordinance out of Chicago, because we know some people that were from Chicago, and years ago, the dog ordinance was much more rigid, and people just had no avenue to resolve the situation. And Chicago has lessened the thing where people can get cited. You don't have to have a police citation, which results in a court date, which results in a hearing. It's much quicker to just fine somebody $50 or $100 if they've got 2 people in the neighborhood complaining. And as I said, this is a quality of life issue. And we spend a lot of time running around the city walking and so forth, and there's a lot of dogs in this place. And don't get me wrong, we had a couple dogs in the family, and one of them managed to give my dad a reason to get up in the morning, and he lived 5 years extra. So we love dogs, but the situation with the neighbors is pure and simple harassment. And we were told by the lawyer that we have retained for a civil case that there should have been a citation issued a long time ago against these people because of the history of what has happened. And I appreciate what the Captain Chief Baird has said, but if we can relax the dog ordinance, quite frankly, it makes it simpler on everybody. And there are going to be these little neighborhood tiffs, but that's something I think we need to address. So I really request that you take a look at the dog ordinance, because it's a step forward, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is there another question or comment, anything that we haven't addressed tonight?
Hello, Mayor, Council. My name is Kyle Sonderegger. I live here in Burlington.
Need your address too, please, sir.
725 Lewis.
Thank you.
I'm hearing concerns of autumn steel and what has been done to change so that doesn't happen again. To ask questions, what's the policy in that kind of situation? And what do we need to do to change that so this doesn't happen again to somebody else's family? I know it's hard, and I understand it's hard on both families, but I don't feel enough has been done. I know they've started training with their online classes, the police department has, which is a great step forward. I don't know if we need to find money for our police department to have more training so they can be more, up to date or better training techniques. I mean, they're not the only people who run into these kind of scenarios, maybe the domestic part, but there's postmen, UPS men. There's all kinds of people who deal with stray dogs or vicious dogs, which this dog was not deemed vicious. And they don't resort to a firearm to take care of the problem. I don't know, like I say, what the standard operating procedure is for that, but there's got to be something wrong with using lethal form or a lethal way to handle the situation. I know our police officers in Burlington, they do a good job. This is just a bad accident, but both parties need to be held accountable. Miss Steele, she doesn't have a chance. She's dead. I think Officer Hill should be accountable for something. There's other laws that, I'm not a lawyer, other lawyers are fighting with the Des Moines County Attorney about it. I'm just here to speak generally about what are we doing to change it so it doesn't happen again. And that's all I can ask of you guys and of Chief, is what can we do to make things different so this doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, Kyle.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you. Well said. Thank you.
Big, you wanna, can I get you to come back? Can I get you to come back up, please, Chief? Or maybe you can kind of address with.
Yeah, I mean, we have started online training, but I don't want you to be confused by an encounter with a dog when somebody's dealing with a deadly situation at the same time. It's two completely different things. But do we need training? Absolutely. Does the state lack the training? Absolutely. And I've already started to address that with the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy. Should it be part of the curriculum at the academy? Absolutely, without a doubt. Can we work on getting that change? Yeah, I can try. You know, I don't have any control over the Academy Council, but I am a member of the Iowa Chiefs of Police Association, and maybe through the association we can get some movement. I don't know why there'd be resistance to it. So in the short term, what I try to do is something immediate and fast and affordable. And the Iowa Department of Department of Justice at the federal level does offer online training with dangerous dogs encounters for police officers. It's like, I think there's 5 different videos. We made it mandatory training. I think the training's completed department-wide. We might have a couple guys yet, but I think everybody's had that. And to take it another step further, I've contacted an animal control expert that's actually here locally. I don't know if they would want me to mention their name, so for now I'm not going to mention their name. But they're an expert in animal behavior, willing to bring animals in so officers can get firsthand training with animals and how to maybe interact with these animals, there's a whole body language thing with dogs and the ability to read that. So, I mean, as far as what are we doing, that's what we're doing. I mean, we obviously have taken this thing to heart. This is a horrible tragedy. I mean, it's just every day that we're trying to get through it and trying to improve the department with this type of training. But I'm going to leave it with this statement that Officer Hill's decision is a decision of reasonableness. And that's a standard that's used across.
Can you say that again?
Reasonableness. And that's a standard that's used across the country at the county level, the state level, the federal level. And you can say, well, what's reasonable? Well, reasonable is that gray. So why do we have district court, the Court of Appeals, the Iowa State Court, and then you have the federal district court, the Court of Appeals, the federal Supreme Court? Well, that's why you have all those people and all those courts that are trying to decide all the time is what does a police officer do that's reasonable. It's not our job, it's not my job to make that split-second decision for them. What option do you use? We have all these options. But it is our job to look back and go, was that option reasonable? Was it reasonable? And that's where we're at. And the county attorney has decided that action was reasonable. Do they have the final say? No. I mean, that's why we have all these different systems and these different courts. And I would assume that down the road here that it's probably going to be in the court's hand at some time. But somebody's going to decide, was that action reasonable? And all we can do at the local level is take the facts and decide at the time, was it reasonable? And she has decided that that action was reasonable. So I just ask you to keep that in mind, that these are absolute split-second decisions. Split second. And was that decision reasonable?
You've had some training in the past too with dealing with canines. 2012, as mentioned to me, citywide, it wasn't just police department, citywide we had an employee training that was done for canines. So it's not like we
Right.
haven't had any training in the past.
Right.
This just really kind of talks, as pointed out, as Doug looked at what responses here to think about is the level of training that we've had enough. And from his viewpoint, he'd like to see additional training occur.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Absolutely. Can we improve? Of course we can improve. I mean, we're lifelong learners, and we'll always do that, and always try to do that. So, I mean, that's where we're at. We've had some, we're gonna have more.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the audience? I see none. Okay. Council, closing comments?
I have a question for Public Works. We were asked on the radio station the other morning where we stand for the budget on snow removal. And I know we had gotten this update from the Public Works, but I hadn't received at that point. And so I'm wondering if you could just fill the public in on where we stand on that.
I know I looked, I think I put that in my monthly report. I looked at the end of February. We had spent like 65% of the salaries that were budgeted, and 74% of the budget at that point in time was snow removal. But I know salary-wise, that did not include at the end of February, that end of February, 1st of March snowstorm, because the overtime for that was still pending. But
So
we're definitely,
reasonably good.
if we get no more snowstorms, we're definitely gonna be below budget on snow removal
Yeah,
this year.
okay. Thank you.
Good. You see to it that we don't get any more snow, please.
That's right.
It's working today,
Yeah, that's the best snow removal plan ever, right?
Let the sun shine. Okay. Closing comments?
I have nothing.
I did want to say that I feel, I'm so sorry for the family of Autumn Steele and for Officer Hill. I just feel so bad about all that, and I hope we can work it out and have better training or whatever, but I just want them to know and the family to know that I'm so sorry for what happened.
I want to say that that's why they call them tragedies. I don't know if there's even another word that really fits it when things like this happen. And you know, I was listening to a radio show or something the other day, and they were talking about how a guy had lost his dad. They went camping or something, and they're great big outdoorsmen. They were talking about, you know, the beauty of everything that they had saw, the waterfalls and all of this stuff, and it was beautiful. They were taking video and stuff, and then the father had fell off the waterfall or something, and that was the last view that his son seen. It was just a tragic deal. And what they said was, his son said how something beautiful, how something that we see can be so beautiful can be so hurtful too, can harm us as well. And things that aren't supposed to harm us sometimes can, and sometimes bad things can happen, and it's just a tragedy. I guess that's the only way I can put it. But I do want to say this. I think that when bad things do happen, once they've happened, you can't do anything about what is already done. You can just try to move forward in the future to make sure that you're doing everything you can to make sure that you've taken the proper steps to ensure that possibly you take the element that something like that can happen again. And I just want to say to the demonstrators, I want to say to Mr. Justice, I appreciate I appreciate the way you came. I really do. I appreciate the way you came. Not everybody comes with that type of attitude. They have their own agenda, and then they get kind of lost in that. And I think that your mindset stayed the same. It was still about what was important, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
I just want to add one thing. I'm grateful for the police chief being in the position that he's in right now. The things that he's had to deal with the last year has been absolutely overwhelming, and a lesser man couldn't have handled it. And he's to be commended for doing an absolutely tremendous, fabulous, any other adjectives you can think of, job in in being as fair and as forthright with all concerned in all the matters. Thanks, Chief.
Say amen.
From the manager's perspective, I have to echo that thought. Chief Barrett's done an excellent job.
Well done.
And just the heart and integrity. And I don't know how much you get to see it on a day-to-day basis, but the heart and integrity that goes into trying to see good decisions made and treating people with respect regardless of what
situation.
circumstances or situation is there.
Okay. Something else I forgot to say again. I wanted to pass that also on to you, Kyle. Thank you for your attitude throughout, even in response. So appreciate that. If there is nothing else, then Bishop.
Your Honor, I move that we adjourn this meeting at this time.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Kathleen.
McCampbell.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Anderson. Aye. Davidson.
Aye.
Fleming.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.